Welcome to the fourth episode of the ClassCast podcast. I am your host, Ryan Tibbens. Today, we will be speaking with former student of mine, Esraa Abo Oun. What year did you graduate high school?
2014.
2014. So I would have taught you 2012, 2013, right? And so that was in an English class, and we got to know each other pretty well. And I'll start with something easy. One of my most prized possessions, and one of the things I keep in my classroom, is a piece of artwork that you gave me. I don't remember if it was the end of that year. It might have been your senior year.
It was my senior year.
Which was a drawing of Malcolm X, right? And so thanks. And I've probably said that multiple times, but yeah, I keep that up in the room. I love it. What about that drawing, or what about maybe Malcolm X, do you like, or what about him made him a guy, a person you wanted to draw?
Well, I drew that drawing for government class.
Really?
We were doing the debate thing where you choose a person from history and you stand up in front of a class and you debate why this person is one of the most important people in American history.
Mm-hmm.
And I chose Malcolm X. And instead of having the trouble doing a PowerPoint slide and just being boring, I was like, I'll just draw Malcolm X.
Right, and you're a great artist, so it came out. It's fantastic.
So that there's a lot about Malcolm X that I admire.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, his strength, his confidence, standing up for what he thinks is right, and standing up for what other people think is right, and encouraging people to speak up and not just, like other leaders who were advocates of the civil rights movement. They mostly recommended silence, and I don't think that's peace. If you tell people to just be silent, mm-hmm. It's more you're calling for injustice.
Right.
But he encouraged people to speak up and be like, okay, no, this is your right, and speak up for it and take it.
Right.
So that's one thing that I admire about him.
Do you think that he still gets, in my opinion, kind of a bum rap as we look at our culture and history, because he's so many different kinds of people rolled up in one? Have you read his autobiography? Okay, it's awesome. It's long. So,
yeah, I picked it up from the library once.
Yeah, it's really good. It's long, but I know that you and I had discussed, and he came up probably once or twice in class. So at that point, I don't think I did a lot with him in class. That's now something that I actually do. Like, I recommend the full autobiography, but I give the option, like in academic level classes, to read Walter D. Myers' young adult version. So it cuts it down to 150 pages, and it's fantastic. But throughout his life, he sort of has a troubled youth related to his parents and his dad's political views and racial and religious views. And then he gets into some trouble in his teens and early 20s, and then he has this reimagining of himself, the reinvention of himself, really, when he's in prison and comes out. And so I think when you bring up a person like Malcolm X, some people immediately think hero, and some people immediately think villain. And because it isn't a clear-cut answer, I think a lot of people give up.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. I think probably way more hero than villain, but there are some parts you could be concerned about. When you say encouraging people to speak up more than other civil rights leaders, is it a fair comparison to put him against a guy like Martin Luther King?
So that's the thing. The way people look at Malcolm X depends on, or comes from, the way he's taught in schools.
Right.
And do they really teach Malcolm X in schools? No.
Yeah.
But they do teach Martin Luther King.
Right.
It's a thing in every English class. They have to play "I Have a Dream," by
right.
Martin Luther King, and it's just, just to also think about why Martin Luther King gets a national holiday.
Right.
Why aren't other leaders kind of mentioned the same way he's mentioned?
Yeah. Why? Almost why do we put his name on it when it could just as easily be Civil Rights Day? Or, not to take anything away from him, but why do you think he gets embraced and say Malcolm X doesn't?
Because Malcolm X called for revolution, and they didn't want that.
So you think it's the the threat of violence?
It's more of it. Some people could be concerned about that, but some people could be concerned about just having blacks as equal as white.
Right. Yeah, I always have fun with that. And now that it's a more integrated part of the class, like even in the AP classes where I still recommend the books, but at this point, until now, I have not required the reading, but we now do. I have everyone read the narrative of the life of Frederick Douglass. And so Frederick Douglass is this cherished American. He's got schools and everything's named after him. But I think he's probably a bit angrier and more revolutionary than most people would recognize. So after they read that, it's a short book, which is good. I pair it with some texts from Martin Luther King, letter from Birmingham jail, things like that, and then excerpts from Malcolm X's autobiography and a couple of his speeches. And I have the class try to sort out, what's the difference? And in my mind, Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X are almost the same person. It's 100 years separated, but they both believe strongly that education can free people, that you should speak up. They were both not loved, but in a broad sense during their lifetime. So you think 100 years passes and you can have a guy who does basically the same job and says very similar things, and we have such different responses to them. But yeah, a lot of students have a different reaction to Malcolm X than Frederick Douglass or Martin Luther King. And at that point, it can't purely be based on race. So I always wonder how much of it is. Again, Malcolm X isn't a violent guy. Later in his life, he never really does anything violent. He just keeps the option open. That he basically says if you tell someone right up front, no violence or no physical altercation will ever occur, you're sort of taking a tool away from yourself. And I think that made a lot of people uneasy. And I don't know if this might be a bad question, but do you think that he is challenged more in terms of his role in our culture based upon that idea that violence could be an option? Or do you think that maybe it's more religious? The idea of converting to Islam, to changing his name. In your opinion, which one do you think is a bigger problem in his legacy? Or at least a problem for, say, mainstream American discussion?
Honestly, when I first learned about Malcolm X, I didn't know he was Muslim.
Yeah.
But getting to know a little bit more, that could be a big, cause or reason why he's not kind of perceived in the same way as Frederick Douglass, for example. I would have to read more into his life events and his choices to kind of be able to tell if. What are the things he said, and then what did people respond to at the time? But in terms of now, it's really mostly how people teach Malcolm X and what they teach about Malcolm X is what kind of creates that perception that people might have.
So do you think that when, and I say we, I mean both in a broad sense, but you can also think about your specific experience at school or my class or however you want to take this. Do you think that we teach certain people or issues poorly? Do you think it's just a lack of knowledge or lack of context, or do you think that there's a specific bias?
There is a bit of bias, but it's we have to remember that teachers are kind of restricted to a curriculum to a certain extent. So there are things that you have to teach more than others because of the curriculum.
Right.
So I think it's the system that kind of would have to be adjusted more than who are the people that are delivering that.
Right. Yeah, anytime I hear anyone push back real hard, and it's usually not in school, it's usually having conversations with friends outside school. A lot of times there's either a concern about difference in culture, whether it's race or religion or whatever, but a lot of times it comes back to the idea of violence. And I see, that's okay, except a lot of those same people really love George Washington. Yeah, this is general who leads in art. There's actual violence occurring. I don't know that there's a difference if you can say that, in one case the threat of violence is a problem, but in another case a guy who actually engages in violence can be the hero. So you say, so you think curriculum would be a part of it. So let's do that, since that's one of the main questions I want to ask. In terms of adjusting school, how would you do that? Like, if you could make a change to your public school experience, what would you adjust or change that you think would be better? And it doesn't have to specifically be about treatment, not action like that. Like, you just identified that you think curriculum in certain ways causes some of these concerns or disputes. What would you do differently?
I mean, I think, well, first of all, the teachers have to be a lot more respected, and kind of the choice of teachers that you put in school should be done in a strategical way. You have to study who you're putting to deliver the information. And curriculums shouldn't be they should not be restricted to. Because again, it's, standardized learning is not, it doesn't teach a lot to students. You're kind of just limiting, and you want everyone to be kind of on the same line, but it's not going to go anywhere for a lot of people.
Right. So do you think that would be best served by adjusting? Obviously, there's a part of this that's, hire different teachers or better teachers. But if you don't have better teachers, you probably can't create that freedom in the curriculum. And when I say better teachers, I'm not saying that, there are plenty of excellent teachers, but there's also plenty that aren't excellent. I don't know that you can give that freedom if you're not super confident in the people in the room. Do you think it makes sense for everyone to show up and think about like our class? You show up when the bell rings and you sit in your seat and everyone's in rows. Is that still an okay format?
It depends on what you're like. If you're giving a short lecture, yes, but doing interactive things like discussions or something, it would require a different setup, for example.
Right.
Just looking at incorporating different ways to teach the students is important to kind of be able to reach all of the different people on their own level of learning.
Right.
Because I've heard people say there's no student who's a bad student. You just have to find a way to get to them.
Right. Right.
So there are, and we have a lot of resources. It's just some schools don't have, don't provide their resources. Can help the students that don't get it from the first time, or don't get it by simply just a lecture.
Right. So you're a recent graduate of George Mason University, and what did you study?
Film and video studies.
So we didn't do any of that in my class, but we probably could have. And some of that comes down to just having the technology that we need to be able to provide, cameras and microphones and the rest. But now all the students have a Chromebook. They each have their own little laptop that comes around that has a camera, has a recorder, has the rest. And it's awesome and safe. It causes some other problems, but it's awesome in a lot of ways. Do you think that's something that would have helped you? Would your personal goals have been better supported or achieved if maybe, say, just for example, in my class, if we had done a video project, cut out one essay and instead make it, a project or product-based sort of thing, would that have improved your experience?
Yeah, because I remember in your class you would show videos or parts of film. That's also something else. Seeing other people talk about it. I can't remember what it was, but it's still stuck in my head. There was a portion of, I believe it was a documentary, but of adopted veterans speaking.
Okay, yeah.
I remember that from your class.
Right.
And it's still in my mind.
Yeah.
The things they were saying and stuff. I think that's something that could be done,
Right.
It doesn't have to be creating a full short film, but, taking parts of that creative process and applying it or pairing it with some of the knowledge that they're learning in class, whether it's skits or actually videotaping things.
Yeah, I know. I think it's called Operation Homecoming. I think was the name of it was a project done by, I forget, it was Library of Congress or National Institute for the Arts, or it was something like that. I still actually, I just showed it this year. That's something that disappeared for a couple of years just for timing purposes, and just this year I brought it back as an end of the year. Hey, we have a few weeks between you're all at the end of your standardized tests, and now we have 2-3 weeks until the end of the school year, and it's what are you going to do? And so we use that, and that was where veterans, I think they were all veterans from the Iraq War, and they each wrote their own short story or poem, and then for the movie what they did was have, in 1 or 2 cases I think the actual author read it, but usually it was like an actor or celebrity reads it, and they put video or images to it, and people tend to like it but have very different responses. So say in terms of using that, like, would you recommend that being the starting point and then offer students, again, thinking about like improving the quality of your education and experience, would it be better to at the end have students create something similar, to talk to someone, do an interview, or just do the class discussion and write a short paper? I mean, and I don't mean to downplay the discussion on the paper, like those are important things to do, but would you have had more interest in it if you had the opportunity to do something like that yourself?
Like if you're in class, let's say that you're teaching the students how to, find the truth when you're watching media.
Mm-hmm.
You show something like American Sniper, and then you show something like an actual video or a testimony of a Iraqi veteran talking about what they actually do in Iraq,
Right.
and their point of view on that,
Right.
and then just having the students, think about that more, and then maybe find, like, there are a lot of veterans that you can kind of try to find and talk to.
Yeah.
It would be very interesting to actually talk to them in person.
Yeah.
And get to hear what they have to say and what they've been through and what their opinion on things.
I think the longer I teach, the more I believe that the specific things you're learning, in terms of names, dates, facts, telling the conflict in a book, or it's not that isn't important, but I think even removed, about 5-6 years from my class, you remember pieces of it, but it's probably the skills and the overall experience that sticks more with you. So why am I, even with this idea, I still do it some, why am I forcing people to tell me about Mark Twain's autobiography, or biography parts of his life, if in the end you're not going to remember that anyway? So maybe in this case, go create your own experience and do the interview, do the video. Is that something, maybe not on that specific topic, but have you done something like that in your work in film?
I have. So when I was in your class, so again, your class was my junior year. It was my 4th year in America.
Okay.
I did not know, I assumed that every basically white person or American had the same view on the Iraq War or on the Middle East.
Mm-hmm.
And when you showed that video, I was like, wait, the veterans who fought in Iraq actually sympathize with the people there and actually kind of say, oh no, this is not something I want to do again, and this is not something that we should be doing. That kind of opened my eye to okay, no, there's another narrative to the story.
Right. There's more diversity in thought than maybe initially.
Yeah, and as someone who wears a head cover, and when I used to say assume this person is a veteran or this person is in the military, I'm like, okay, they probably hate me right now, right?
Right. Did you really think that?
Yeah, it was kind of I don't know what they're thinking,
But you did not assume that it was always going to be good.
Yeah.
Which,
Yeah.
is maybe a fair concern, but...
See, when I went to Nova, I had, I think, 2 classes that were veterans in the class.
Okay.
And they were, the nicest people.
Mm-hmm.
And they, and I pay attention to details and, people's, facial expressions and stuff. But they would show me respect.
Right.
And it was obvious. And I was like, okay, so definitely when you meet, you can kind of show it on screen to students,
right.
But when they see it in person,
right.
it's a whole different level, because now there's a human being that's in front of you that's walking around with those ideas that you just saw on the screen,
Yeah,
so it's totally different, yeah.
Or even to hear the opposite, to see one thing depicted on the screen and then to meet a person who is angrier about the situation. I mean, either way, to make your own conversation might be a good thing. and probably makes it all seem a little more real or a little more important. So thinking, so you said you'd lived in the United States for 4 years when you were in my class? 4? And that was one of the things that struck me the most. It maybe took about a marking period into the year. It was somewhere in the fall. Like, it was relatively early in the class. And I knew that you were an immigrant, but I didn't know the timing or any of the details. And it's a tough class. Like, I think people are like, so I don't think it's as hard as most students tell me. And that's probably just wishful thinking, I just say, well, it's just...
I think it's just different.
I just say your other classes aren't hard enough.
Yeah.
That's probably just me making excuses. But you did well in a tough class and in a setting where we were dealing with some tougher controversial issues in our culture and history. We deal with race and deal with poverty and deal with some of these things. But you also, wrote good papers. You said you were great in class discussion. And
I don't remember participating in class.
You did.
Really?
Yeah,
Okay,
but I want to say it was, sparse isn't the right word, but it was when you chimed in, it was excellent. You were not the most talkative person in the room, but if I remember correctly, there were 1 or 2 people in that class who talked to the entire block if I would have allowed it. So sometimes it's just a balance. But after getting to know you a little bit more and reading writing, I was not only impressed by your ability to think and think critically, to ask questions or take a different perspective, but that you were doing that with far less experience in an American classroom or in an English class in an English-speaking country. How much do you think I don't necessarily want to say like experience as an immigrant, that's not really what I mean, but how much of your experience in school was affected, improved, or hurt by your sort of newness, I guess, in a way? Like, do you think your experience in school was drastically different than other people in the room because you had a different background?
I mean, definitely. I was moving to a whole new culture,
right,
a whole new language, and the fact that after, a little bit into my freshman year, it was when the war in Syria started, and I actually wanted to go back to Syria a little bit before that, but then I couldn't. Right. So I was like, I'm stuck here. Right.
Like it or not.
Yeah. And in the beginning years, I kind of it was a lot of the language barrier that kind of.
Did you speak English at all when you moved here?
It was very, very.
So a little.
Yeah. So I was put in beginner's ESL in 8th grade.
Okay.
And then I jumped to advanced in 9th grade.
Okay.
And then I left ESL in 10th grade. And then I came to class.
And then you were in an honors English class in 11th grade.
And I took AP.
I was just going to say, and that's before. Now you can do AP Lang in 11th grade and then Lit in 12th grade. So now you were there when you didn't have an AP option in 11th grade. So you went straight down you went to the top level English class available after essentially just exiting the ESL or ELL program. And I mean, that's a testament to your intelligence and ability. But that also, obviously, in addition to changing your actual experience in the room, probably affects your perspective as well. How would you compare your educational experiences in Syria before moving to what we have here? And I have no idea what you're going to say here. So, same setup. You show up, you sit at the desk, the bell rings. You think, are the teachers different?
It's kind of. There's a lot more activity that goes on in classrooms here than there. So there, it's just you have 5 or 6 classes a day. Each one is like 45 minutes. You only get 2 15-minute breaks, and then you sit in the same classroom. The teacher comes to you. Okay, so it's almost like you sort of do that usually at elementary school, where like the art teacher comes to you, the music teacher comes to you, or at least in some schools. Yeah.
That's tough though to sit that long and not move.
Yeah, and you have for some classes you just can't talk. You just listen to the teacher, and then that's it. But the things that we learn, the curriculum there is a lot more advanced than here. So I remember I learned like I was telling my brother the other day, like I remember in earth science in ninth grade, we talked about the Earth's revolution and evolution around the sun.
Right.
I learned that in first grade.
Right.
In Syria.
Well, and you know, I don't teach elementary school, so I don't know this, but I'm pretty sure that some things like that they teach in elementary school and then reteach because they just assume, you know, I think in like third grade or fourth grade, the whole thing is U.S. and Virginia history, and then what do you do in 11th grade? U.S. and Virginia history. You know, I mean, great, you do it much better, but so you feel like in terms of pacing the knowledge or the skills, they maybe push harder in Syria.
Yeah,
definitely.
We learned algebra and geometry in 7th grade.
Okay. Is that good?
See, the thing is, it's you also, even if you were good, the grades determine what you're gonna go into in college. So
it
it's
sort
not
of puts you on a
necessarily-
track.
Yeah, it's not necessarily like, okay, you have the opportunity to kind of. There's definitely a lot more opportunity here.
Okay.
A lot more choices, a lot more. You have the ability to explore different things.
Right.
Here.
And that's something that's come up in each one of these talks so far, is that people seem to believe we need even more choice in that way, and that might be true. But say to put it in that context where you can compare it to, I sit at this desk for the whole day, the teacher lectures at me, it's my job to learn it, figure it out, do it, and you already maybe have some more freedom in what you're gonna, the classes you choose to take or the things you're gonna do in the class. And so the idea that people are pushing for more of that, I think is good, but that's interesting. I don't know, I think probably a lot of the world isn't doing that, at least based on my occasion, discussions with students from other parts of the world. I get that sense that we already have a little more freedom in it, and that's a thing that I think people want more of. So that's interesting. Obviously, with the way everything has played out, both in terms of education, but also thinking politically and with the war in Syria and the rest, if you had stayed there, a big if no civil war occurs, do you think that school in Syria would have served you better, worse, or the same as what you experienced here? Like, if you stayed there, finished school, and then moved to the United States, so put yourself in the same situation now, do you think that you would be better off? Or do you think that what we did here, or what you experienced here, was better?
For finishing school there, it depends on the major. Like, for example, my cousin finished school there, and then she came here, and she's an American citizen. She was born here.
Okay.
She graduated as a dentist, but when she came here, she had to take all those tests again, and take some time. It takes some time to kind of get on track with your career.
Right.
I would say it's better here because of the different cultures they're exposed to. Not necessarily the school curriculum, but having the ability to learn about different people. You're more aware of the world. You're more open to a lot of different ideas than you are there. It's a lot more restricted there.
Okay. And and that sounds like a good thing, and I'd like to believe that's always true. Some of that also could be an effect of where we are. We're in a fairly diverse community. There's a lot of people, both from different parts of the United States, that move to the Northern Virginia or DC metro area for work, for education, for things. But there's also a large immigrant population. Broad Run, where I teach and you graduated, is, I think, 50% white. And not all of those students would have been born here. But we're on the verge of being what they would call a majority-minority school. And so the level of diversity in terms of race and religion and cultural background is probably, it's much more diverse setting than if you went to school in the middle of Iowa. And so I don't know how,
Yes, it's objective to where you are.
Yeah.
But where, I had the opportunity to be here, and, I did get, and, like I said, it was kind of negative that I had the language barrier, but also positive because I spent the first couple of years more of an observant, and I think that's how I learn most.
Right.
And I pay attention to details. So I would just observe the environment around me. And then just kind of, then after, I kind of gathered all that information and processed it.
Right.
Then I was like, okay, this is what I think of this, and this is how I'm going to go about, these things.
Right.
Yeah.
That's interesting that, now as a filmmaker, someone with a degree in film, like what you just described is almost exactly the thing that you've ended up doing is watching carefully and then figuring out how to piece together what you're seeing so that other people see it your way. Really. Right? Is there maybe something you're working on now or something you've done either for yourself or in school? Do you have a film, long, short, whatever? I know you've been working on some things and you've had some success. Do you have something that you would say you're most proud of, or maybe something that maybe reflects that view? And I don't mean to say your views like, and we're moving to the country, but so much where you're watching carefully and now you have the opportunity to make everyone else watch carefully too. Do you have something that you've made like that you feel?
I have two projects. The most recent one is my capstone film. It's a short narrative that follows a Syrian family.
Mm-hmm.
And for that one is basically, and I got funding from a research program at Mason. So it required research.
Okay.
Which is basically I collect the information that I need, the stories that I've heard from family members, the things I've seen on the media, and I bring all of that information and I'm like, okay, what do I want people to see? And, it's the media mostly shows you like news reports and stuff. They mostly show you numbers of the events that are happening on ground in other countries or overseas. So, I wanted to zoom in on individuals so that people get a chance. Yeah, people get a chance to meet who are those people behind those numbers that you're seeing. What are the things that are being affected? So then I kind of use film to create that story and film it.
So this requires research. This requires a lot of careful piecing together. What's it called, by the way?
Jihad.
It's called?
Jihad.
Jihad, okay.
Yeah.
So I guess I have a different question. How much of the title is meant to reflect content in the film versus how much of the title is meant to attract attention to? Like, how much of that is hook to get people interested versus how much of it is part of, say, the plot?
Yeah, it's definitely part of the plot. And, it's this word is like on everyone's radar. It's like, oh my God,
Right.
That's something that will kind of get people's attention, but I also want people to question.
Right.
Like if you watch the film, you'll go throughout the film and someone who only knows what jihad means from the Western perspective, they'd be like, wait, why is it called jihad? Right?
Okay.
And then now comes the answer of, well, the word has been defined, misdefined on the media.
Okay.
Right? It means struggle. It means striving to live. We're striving for something that's better.
Right.
And whenever people kind of hear the word jihad combined with Syria, they automatically think ISIS. ISIS is nowhere in the film.
Right. Okay.
And I kind of wanted to remind people and draw attention to the struggle that people are facing, the individuals, the civilians that are facing.
Okay. Sort of your regular person.
Yeah. The true definition of the jihad that's happening in Syria that needs attention is the struggle of those people, of the civilians.
So I guess, and this was the other question I was going to ask then, is how much of the film is purely fiction versus how much is, a representation, how much is nonfiction versus fiction? Obviously you're piecing together research and actual experience, but did you actually base this on an actual family, or did you sort of invent the family and then put the rest of the pieces to it?
I had to find the ethical balance of it. So the family is fictional. Their names, the combination of them, and the events that happen to the family are true events. I've taken from family members who have experienced certain things. There are different things that the family goes through, and then each one of those different events I've gotten from a place, and I piece them together.
Right. So it's a little bit like a little bit of a jigsaw puzzle almost.
Yeah.
Okay. How long is the film?
It's about 10 minutes. shorts.
Okay, so short film.
Yeah.
So in terms of, I like how you focus on the definition of the word jihad. It's something, we probably did a little bit in our class, but that I do a lot more now, especially in AP language. It's focused on rhetoric and looking at how people are expressing things, not just what you're saying, it's really how you're saying it. And I think a lot about connotation and denotation. So, denotation is what does it say in the dictionary? And then your connotation is how do people actually use it? Like when you hear a word, it makes you feel a thing. And how the word makes you feel is probably more important than what it actually says in the dictionary. And so in defining jihad as struggle, that allows for, please correct me if at any point I say, if I'm just wrong, but it allows for what I think is probably a more, I don't know if the word modern or progressive view of it. Like, I know that there are people who look at the word in a very literal sense, in an historical context within the Qur'an, and take it to very literally be a struggle against other people. Like it becomes a more violent word, right? And my feeling, and this is the part where I can run about this, is that I get the sense from people I know that in a somewhat, I don't know if the word is progressive or modern, I'm not defining it well, that it really could be an internal struggle, that it could just be the struggle to be good or to live a good life. Is that a fair way to think about, like, am I explaining that well? I'm probably doing a terrible job.
That's the thing, like, having the word misdefined makes it seem like, whatever came originally in the scripture is the kind of more harsh, violent way to think of it. But it's actually, even in Islam, there's the jihad means different things. Like your struggle within yourself,
right.
Your struggle to provide for your family, that's jihad. Me wearing the headscarf in a country that looks at it negatively, that's jihad.
Okay. So you can almost just substitute in the word like fight, because everyone can be fighting something personally, internally, externally.
But it's for the sake of something good.
Right.
That's the key.
So when you say for the sake of something good, is it fair? Can you fairly apply that broadly? Just say it's sort of general goodness, or does it need to be a more religious or spiritual goodness? How closely does the word need to be used with religion versus all the other struggles in life? There are a lot of ways you can fight for something that's good that may or may not be directly involved in religion. Can you still use that word outside of the religious context? Or does that not make sense?
Yeah, the thing is, like, we believe that the religion is almost like a curriculum in your life, right?
Okay.
And it's one of the base ideas in the religion is that for example, you have to be happy. That's something that, not have to be happy, but taking care of yourself.
Smile whether you like it or not.
No, taking care of yourself.
Okay.
Right? That's a requirement in our religion.
Okay.
Taking care of your family is a requirement in your religion.
Right.
Giving charity. Doing things that in society are considered maybe culturally good.
Mm-hmm.
They're looked at as benevolent acts. Those are requirements of our religion.
Okay. So, yeah, and I actually have this conversation occasionally with friends who are, like, they're Christian, but I always feel like that's a weird way to say it, because some of these people do not regularly attend church, and so you're almost like culturally Christian as opposed to, but the idea that, when you say like separate church and state or things like that, and my point is, as a person who's very interested in religion, but is not particularly religious, really like having a discussion, but I don't personally practice anything. I say that, I always feel like if you really believe something that strongly, then everything else in your life has to be affected by it. Imagine that it's almost like if you have like a topographic sort of map, or like a model with like mountains and things like that. If that is like your core belief, and everything else you do in your life is like laying a blanket over it, the blanket is the blanket, but once you lay it down, it takes the shape of whatever's underneath it. And so in that way, I guess, summarize or paraphrase and correct me, but the way you're saying it makes me think that your feelings on religion, or in this case, the use of the word jihad, would be involved in everything, because everything would be involved in religion or in your religious views. Is that fair? Is that, like, you can't take them apart, kind of?
Yeah.
What's been the response to the film? Like, Are you getting to have these conversations? Or?
In certain classes, yes. And it was interesting to kind of, all the weeks leading up to the Mason Film Festival where it was first screened, just hearing people say, oh, I'm excited to see jihad. Oh, I really want to see jihad, right? And just kind of using that word in a positive connotation.
Right, when people
really
said it, they weren't angry or scared.
It was interesting because in my, when I first pitched the idea of the film to the class and the professor, I mentioned the name, and no one said anything. Right? No one asked me.
Like good, bad, or otherwise, like everyone just sort of.
Yeah, and then there's another student who was doing a really interesting documentary about a Muslim father who was wrongfully imprisoned, and then she's filming their reunion with her friend and the father, and she was like, "Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research and." I learned a lot of things. Like, I didn't know jihad meant holy war. And I was like, okay. And I told the class, I was like, when I said the name, the choice of the main character of the film was named Jihad. Okay. And then it changed. But the film was still called Jihad. And I was like to the class, when I said that was the title of my film, no one said anything. No one asked me.
Right.
Why?
Yeah.
And they almost didn't really pay attention.
Well, do you think it's that they didn't pay attention, or that no one wanted to touch it because
it's
like was it out of like a general discomfort, or when someone says a thing that you're like, I'm not even going to touch it, and you just pretend like that didn't happen and move on?
Maybe. Yeah. But I addressed it. I was like, this is what jihad means in Islam. It's an Arabic word, and those are its ties to religion. And this is what I'm doing with it in the film. And the girl was like, okay, because you told me that, because she would have been doing the opposite of what I'm doing. What I'm trying to do,
So when she says that, like, was that a genuine appreciation? Was she appreciative of a better awareness of the word and topic?
Yeah.
Or was that a little bit of like, oh crap, everything I've done is rude?
No, she was like, no, and she was like, yeah, I need to look into it more, and we kind of had a conversation about, I had to tell her that the word has been misdefined in the media, and if you know how Google search works, they only show you what you're biased towards.
They're very good at showing you what you want to see.
Yeah, exactly,
Which is
what
horrifying.
you're used to. Yeah.
Well, and I say that, but of course, I love when I'm looking for something sort of random and specific, and I type half a word and it knows exactly what I want. I love it because you just save me all this time and trouble. But then sometimes when I'm genuinely asking an open-ended question, then sometimes you only get the answer they think you want. And I almost wish there was a toggle switch on Google where I could turn that on and off. Show me everything versus show me just what I want. Do you, given your concerns about how not just the word jihad, but maybe Islam in general is portrayed in American media, do you think that's something that we should address in school?
Yeah.
Or do we address in school? I mean, I obviously only sit mine in class, so is that something that you feel like, did that come up in a government class or a history or culture class? Is this a conversation that you got to have in high school?
No.
Should you?
Yes. Because it causes, I remember this is something else I also remember from your class. I can't remember who said it, but you were telling us that not knowing causes fear, and fear causes violence.
Right.
I can't remember who said that quote. And I'm not quoting word.
Yeah, no. I know what you're saying. I'm trying to think of it's an idea that comes up a couple of different times in my class. So okay.
Yeah, and because people don't know, what Islam actually is or what it promotes, and they're only kind of taking and believing everything they're saying, it causes fear, and then that fear causes violence, and it causes people to Islamophobes to act on their fears.
Right. Do you think that that's the reciprocal? Is that sort of the other side of the same coin, where maybe in some places in the Middle East where, say, a school curriculum is more controlled, or maybe you have state media, and so people maybe don't have access to broad information. When you saw the video of the Iraq veterans and you realized that some of them had very strong feelings about why they shouldn't be fighting, or they should be, but you had concerns about how it's playing out and the rest. Are those conversations that are missed in Middle Eastern schools maybe the same way that
Definitely. Yeah,
like,
absolutely. Like after when the Iraq war started, it was like, I think I was like 6 or something.
Yeah.
But I remember ever since then, like we grew up with a fear of America.
Mm-hmm.
Because we were like, especially us, we're on the borders of Syria.
Mm-hmm.
So we're like, they would always say, like I grew up with something called the danger alarm, where an alarm would go off in the city every once in a while just to test it. But this alarm would go off if we're at war. So they would always say, oh, like, you know, there's a chance that America's going to invade us. So, you know, just playing in the neighborhood, me and my cousins were like, okay, you know, we would hear the alarm, we're used to it, we'd pause for a little bit, you know, and we would just look around to see what the adults are doing.
Right.
No one runs off. So we're like, okay, it's just a test, right?
Yeah, that's a weird thing though. I probably used to talk about it differently, but now it comes up every year when we do the lockdown drill, like school shooters coming in, whatever. And I mean, it's something you need to be concerned about. You should be aware of and try to have a plan in place. But the likelihood of ever experiencing that, thankfully, is very low. And so, as much as it's to make sure there's a plan and to give confidence to students, to young people that like there are things we're trying to do to make sure we're staying safe, like it's also a reminder that you're in danger in ways that maybe you are, maybe you aren't. It's the old duck and cover turtle, you know, we used to do during the Cold War when I did it a couple times at elementary school, and then it shows my age, but for decades, American schools did a bomb drill where everyone hid under their desks. You could have been living in the middle of Wyoming. No one is dropping a bomb. There's no one there. Like it would be the biggest waste of a bomb, but those schools still did. And so, yeah, it's a little bit of a plan to keep you safe. It's also a little bit of propaganda to remind you that maybe someone wants to hurt you. Yeah. And so you sort of become accustomed to, what was it called again? You said
it was like they called it the danger alarm.
The danger alarm.
And like imagine us like on our way back home from school. We used to walk from school.
Right.
And then we hear it and there's no one, like no teachers for us to ask, like, is this a test or not? Really like we just sprint home just to kind of get
just in case.
And it was like, and we also used to watch like I remember as a kid I would go to sleep sometimes and on the TV I'm watching the Gaza war.
Okay.
And what's happening in the children in Gaza. And I've been to areas on the borders of Jolan, or in English they call it Golan, where the Israeli occupation took from Syria. You do live with that fear, and you know, just watching children here is different than children there. Like as a child, I remember we'd be like playing. And then we would just pause and start talking. And one of the questions sometimes we would ask each other, we're like, okay, if the war comes, who are you going to carry with you and run to the shelter? When you run to the shelter, what are you going to carry with you? Like, that's something we ask each other to get.
Right, like, well, oh,
right. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe in that setting, it not only makes sense to ask it, but to have that plan. But it's also very uneasy feeling that's always a thought of, you know, having that priority list in the back of your mind. But in the United States, maybe, you know, people don't sense the direct threat, but I think at least some people feel like there's a broader kind of threat, and maybe that's some of the concerns about having to portray the media. This is something that I actually got from Jessica Bird, who was the guest on the last podcast, and it was a thought experiment really for feminists sort of issues, and she had said that, you know, what would you do if, to a room full of women, what would you do if all men disappeared for a few days? Hospitals, everything keeps working, but just, and it was, I'd go for a jog at night, or I could go for this road trip, and not where, you know, it blew my mind. I was the only male in the room. It blew my mind, thinking like, wow, if all women disappeared, like, nothing really would change, you know, because I don't perceive any sort of threat there. And so I actually used that talking to a family member who lives in a far more conservative area than here. And I just, you know, we're talking about politics and whatever. And I said, you know, he brought up a concern about Islam, like invading the United States. And how would your life be different if all Muslims disappeared from the United States for a week? And he didn't really have an answer. And I said, well, that's your first indication that your fear is disproportionate to whatever. I'm not saying you can't have your concern. I'm just saying, like, if this is like a thing that really bothers you, and then you say, well, all the people who I associate with that fear disappear, and your life doesn't change, you shouldn't have been that afraid in the first place, you know? Like, how would you do that in school? I mean, aside from reading from a textbook about the doctrine, say, of a particular faith, or doing the last 50 years of, or last 100 years.
I mean, asking questions like that, like the social experiments, are really interesting.
I mean, I just think, like, do you think that would be the best way to help young people? I'm not going to change. Like, when I talk to a family member I'm thinking about, like, he's at an age where I'm never going to change it.
Yeah.
And even if I do, it doesn't yield any actual results, right? But I work with young people. We're in schools. Like, if you're going to try to make some sort of change in awareness or acceptance or anything else, like, that's probably the time to do it. Is that the best way to do it? Like, just have that conversation? Like, what do you think would help people to better understand?
I think definitely, like, some lecture would be necessary to kind of just lay down, okay, this is what it has been in history, this is where the fear was caused, this is what the media speaks about it, and then kind of, also the one-on-one meet a Muslim, right? Ask them your questions, right?
It's funny. You said that, I just imagined like a weird, like, everybody goes to the cafeteria and you do like speed dating. You go table to table and you just talk to a different person.
Yeah.
So personal experience would maybe be the way to do it.
Yeah, or it would be cool, like, to use, I don't know, connect with someone overseas. Have a Skype call in a class with someone in Malaysia. I don't know. Yeah. That would be cool.
I just like dated myself in my head when you said, talk with someone, communicate with someone overseas. And I immediately thought, like, a pen pal. You said Skype, and I was like, oh, I'm a dinosaur. Oh, no. Yeah, and things like that are probably hard to maybe set up. But once you have that relationship where you can, someone at another school overseas, then it wouldn't really be that difficult to do it. So if every kid has a Chromebook, what would stop you from being able to take a half hour in Skype or email or whatever?
I have my screenwriting professor in Mason. She teaches also filmmaking in Nova, and she worked on a project with the film students from Nova, and they created a project with students in Ethiopia, and that was interesting.
Yeah.
I didn't get to see what the project was, but just the idea of kind of connecting the young people here with the young people there, and them sharing perspective.
Yeah, having that cultural exchange. And to your point, we have those tools. That was one thing you said earlier on is that sometimes we have the resources or the tools to do these things, and then the question is, like, why aren't we? And that it could just be a lack of creativity or motivation on the part of the teachers, principals, or whatever else. It's also I think, again, is maybe fear of the unknown, because when you set up this communication, you never know what the other side's going to say. And so maybe people get nervous about what is the outcome. In your experience in school, and you've already pointed out that the difficulties of moving to a new country and learning the language and spending the first couple of years essentially just observing, and all that. Do you feel like you were ever either given an extra opportunity or maybe more likely denied an opportunity or treated differently because of your either national background, religion, your attire? Like, have you ever experienced that in a school setting, any sort of either discrimination in a negative way, or maybe someone giving you an extra opportunity because of it? Has that been a part of your experience in school?
Like, I would speak to a lot of my friends and ask, like, we would talk about, like, if you ever been, like, experienced bullying or, discrimination. And, when they point out certain things, I'm like, okay, yeah, I've kind of, I've had someone look at me that way, or have had someone, like, say a word or something like that. But I think, I guess I've always been the person who would just kind of ignore it.
Okay.
So I wouldn't really, I can't remember, I don't let it get to me.
Right.
In terms of getting an opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, like, say in ESL or DLL classes, generally they're you smaller classes. A lot of times there's two teachers, sometimes two teachers and an assistant. So in a way, that's an opportunity, but it's also a little bit of scaffolding. Like it's maybe a necessity to help people move into the mainstream classroom and the rest. So while that is a great service, and in a way is an opportunity, it's not necessarily. It's not something that's like special to you or your situation. It's just, this is what we need to do to help everyone be functional in the classroom. I don't know, we had an interesting thing go on in the county. They're doing, I forget what they called it. It's like an equity study or something. They called in outside consultants to go around to a handful of schools and just do interviews with students, with teachers, and parents, and talk about, how school's serving you or not, et cetera. But really what they're doing is breaking that down by a sort of racial group and looking at, are we addressing disparities and results and the rest? And in those conversations, or after the fact, I talked to some of the students who were involved, and I was in one of the interviews. And some students were very quick to point out the teacher who treated them poorly, or that is quick to say.
I mean, yeah, I can point out teachers like that, but
yeah, but then there's some who also were like, well, I guess it goes on. I don't know. I just try not to worry about it, and I couldn't feel out how much of that is like ignoring the problem, like sort of just a little bit of denial, or it's easier if I just like let that go, versus how much of that was just really, it wasn't that big of a deal and the student found a way to pass it. But we ended up having these conversations a lot in the school year because it's something to be doing. But the focus was, I don't want to say it was, my perception was the focus was so much on race, particularly looking at sort of the disparities between white students and then black and Hispanic students. I don't know if they really addressed issues of other parts of culture or religion, or and I don't know how they broke it down, but I heard a lot of interesting things from students. And
I mean, sometimes students can be afraid to say or point out certain things. The ignoring can be part of their fear of, okay, what if I'm Hispanic and I don't have papers, or my parents don't have papers, what if this causes me a problem?
Right. The safe thing is
to just ignore it.
It's tough. So, okay, and we don't have to call anyone out. I know you can if you want, but you as soon as you said like some teachers, your eyes sort of lit up. You're like, I mean, I could name a few, and I'm not asking necessarily to do that. Do you think that when those situations occur, or when there is a teacher that holds some kind of bias, do you think that's obvious in the classroom? Like, if you observe something, you're like, clearly there's some sort of bias or discrimination here. Do you think you're just being more perceptive about it? Or do you think most kids that are like your average upper middle class white male sitting in the room, do you think he notices?
See, the thing is, like, when I was in high school, I saw a lot of the high schoolers as just, I don't want to say immature, but they focused on different things than, should I really pay attention to if the teacher is, or should I think about if the teacher is doing something right or wrong?
Right.
And sometimes, a lot of times, I feel like if there was any encounter of, between a teacher and a student, it's usually not in front of the whole class.
Right. That's like the hang on for a minute at the end of class. Okay. So, we've got some good and we've got some bad, and we've got some ideas about, say, increasing choice or using some of our resources and tools better. What did you experience in school that has helped you? Either personally or professionally with your major? Are you seeking a job now, or are you going to go to more school?
No, not school right now. I'm taking a break.
Okay, hey, that for a lot of reasons, is probably a good thing. Like how has your school experience served, helped you in positive?
Are we talking about high school or just?
I mean, in general, I'm obviously thinking high school because that's what I do, but you could also think college. So here's my bias. I am a teacher, and so I would like to believe that education is important, or I do believe. But I also don't necessarily think that school and education are always the same thing. I talk about that a lot in class, that some of the best education you get is not in the classroom. And that means that some of the things we're doing in the classroom aren't really education, but we put them together an awful lot. So think about school, because obviously education can for anyone. Your school experience, whether it is high school or college or middle or elementary school, what have you done in school that was good, that has helped?
I'll speak on the more recent classes that I took in Mason, and I felt like it was, I don't know if it's just strictly because I'm in an art field, film, but a lot of the professors did encourage, they always encourage projects that address social issues. They encourage students to be critical thinkers, to think about the ethics of things, So I feel like, and they kind of encouraged them to combine film with politics. We discuss politics a lot in film, and that's something that I appreciated because you're doing more than just enjoying whatever short film that you're making. You're trying to make a difference. In schools like high school. I think it was different from teacher to teacher, but like you said, like in English classes, you can teach the student how to read, but teaching them how to read, you either teach them how to say the syllables, and you only produce sound, or you teach them how to actually read what's behind the words, right? And then you produce a critical thinker, right? I think for high schools, it depends on the teachers. Some teachers are able to give the students education beyond what the curriculum says, and kind of prepare them to understand more of the world around them and how to navigate their way through.
Right. So for however often that happens, whatever percentage of your teachers or classes do that, 20%, 80%, whatever, do you feel like your school experience helped you to be a critical thinker? And maybe to clarify, I already said that you're a very smart person, right? And it became clear through your writing participation in class early on in the school year, especially considering that you're sort of overcoming language barrier and rest. Do you think that you personally could have achieved that? Like, you showed up already thinking very critically, right? Do you think school extended that for you? Did it do a good job of that?
I would have to say that, in our family, we do a lot of discussions. So, like, on the dinner table, we discuss politics, we discuss culture, we discuss religion. So I already have, like, a platform at home to kind of exchange ideas.
Right.
But I would definitely say that, to a certain extent, I got to learn a lot of different perspectives at home. At school, that I would bring back to home.
Right.
And it would help even my siblings now. They're in high school.
Okay.
And they're kind of like, they're able to kind of critically think about the education system. They can give their opinion on a lot of different local things,
Yeah, okay. So, as you started saying that, I was thinking, so really the discussions at home are helping in school and supporting, those discussions at school. But I guess it is an exchange because then you're going to take whatever's happening at school home to inform those discussions. Do you think if your family was less engaged or engaged in that way, do you think school would be doing its job well enough? Like if you were a student who goes home and your family doesn't have that conversation, all we're going to talk about is who won the football game on Sunday. Not that that's not fun, but do you think school is doing enough to help a person who doesn't have that family support?
I think the answer would be, like, it's on the spectrum.
Right.
You have different factors. You have a person who themselves, like, they're willing to go and search things up on the internet to kind of, get that, whether they have family support or not.
Right.
And then you have people who, like, through family discussions, they kind of increase their ability to think about different perspectives. And then you have people who just discuss it with their friends.
Right.
And then you have people who don't. And they're definitely going to be, to a certain extent, less aware of the world almost than those who do engage in different environments and learn from different environments.
Right. But yeah, but if you already don't have the curiosity or the interest, then,
it has to be there, like to a certain extent.
Right. So you said a thing that I don't know that this applies to you, but in recording these conversations and then in talking to some friends who have listened to them, I'm finding there's a building theme that I never fully expected, and so I started calling it Google U. But essentially, that people are learning both for school and maybe more importantly for jobs. I'm talking to more and more people who are essentially saying like school is great, but or school is terrible, but, and then essentially saying that a lot of what they're doing in their jobs, they really just got from like Google and YouTube. That there's a lot of sort of self-education going on, and you just recently finished school. So has that been a part of your education? Like, did you find yourself relying a lot on outside resources, or has, say, your college education done that for you?
I think mine's different because of the field. There's a lot hands-on,
Right.
anyways. But I would definitely what if schools equipped its students to be able to do that research beyond what they learn in the actual classroom? That's something,
Yeah.
There's a lot to learn out there, just outside the classroom.
Right, yeah, and as people have greater access to it, we probably need to change how we're thinking about school and what we're doing in it. If people can turn around and go learn a lot of what they need online.
Teach them how to learn, teach them how to navigate their way online.
Right.
How to tell, we kind of touch on, when you look at an article, you can tell if it's authentic or not authentic and all that stuff,
Right.
but
And we
it's
probably
more,
don't do that.
a lot can be done to kind of coach students to seek knowledge outside the classroom.
It sounds like your college experience has been mostly good, at least in like the film program. Do you wish we had a formal film class in high school? Would you have taken it? Like, did you have that interest in it?
I don't know, because I started college, I studied interior design for 2 years.
Okay.
And then I switched to film. But it's very interesting, and I think it would be interesting to a lot of people. I know in some middle schools they have film classes. Like my brother took a film class in middle school, and he said he loved it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that's something working towards. Like in our school, it started last year, but now they do like a filmed morning announcements where students like basically read the news. But the goal is to turn it into a film class. I don't know how that's going to play out. But that would certainly be the kind of thing that would give you some of the tools and the hands-on opportunities and the rest. So you didn't start as a film agent. You didn't take any film classes in high school. You took a lot of art classes, right?
Yeah.
What prompted the change to film?
So I wasn't enjoying interior design fully, just because I felt like I was kind of boxed into just this one relationship with the clients,
Right.
and I kind of wanted to go beyond that. I was taking an art history class, and in art history, all we did was just look at different pieces of art from different places, analyze the piece, but also connect it to what's happening in society then.
Right.
And just realizing how big an effect art has on society, and just knowing or recognizing that film is the most powerful form of communication in our time.
Yeah.
It kind of, I wanted to kind of look into it and see if I can do something with that.
So like a sense of, is film attractive because of the opportunity to make an impact that maybe you didn't see in interior design? Is that part of the motivation?
That's what drew me in. And then I kind of left my option a little bit open just in case I wasn't enjoying the process.
Right.
But I did enjoy it.
Okay.
So,
given that parts of this are sort of changing the world or having this impact, that it's a medium that can give you influence. Are we at a time where we need that? I mean, I think there's plenty of debate constantly about politics, about school, about that. There's, you know, and it's in certain ways maybe the downside of social media is that, you know, because you're not sitting across the table from a person, because I'm hiding behind the screen, I think there's a lot of disrespectful conversation that occurs that if you were actually speaking with that person face to face, not that you wouldn't believe a different thing, but I bet people would say it a lot differently. Do you think that your goal as a filmmaker is made more important because of that? Like, is there a sense of urgency, I guess what I'm saying?
Definitely.
I mean, there's a lot of conflicts.
Yeah, especially like with what's happening in Syria, and just kind of watching the different, you know, seeing a certain group that you feel like you are a part of being portrayed in a certain way on the media kind of gets you like, and if you don't speak up for yourself, like who's going to speak up for you, right?
Right.
Right. So, yeah, I can't keep saying, oh, like, why is the media saying this about my religion? And then I don't go and do something about it, right?
Right, you know, yeah, but it's involved
Yeah.
into it. It's really interesting. That how much of your work to this point, maybe in school, how much of it, you said they've promoted sort of critical thinking, some philosophy, at least some ethics and some politics. How much of your film projects at this point have been politically oriented and motivated? I mean, is it a lot of it? A little bit? Clearly, there's at least some of that going on in jihad. Most of it. And what's been the overall reception? I mean, not so much like critically from the professor, but when you show your work to friends or to fellow students, do people get it?
Mostly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if you remember the interactive video that I sent you.
Yeah.
That we screened it in 3 different places, and one of them was it was like a communication conference,
Okay.
and we had like different people come into the room, and we played it multiple times, and it was there were people of different backgrounds, and it was interesting to see they're like, oh, you know, just having those 2 different narratives be put. Like, we've heard both of them,
Right.
both of the news reports, but having them juxtaposed together
Right.
is eye-opening to what we actually have to think about, you know.
Yeah, and you're leveraging the technology to make that possible. It's funny. I couldn't place it at first, and then a few weeks ago when I contacted you about doing this, I had scrolled up in like previous Facebook messages and I saw the link, and so I went back and looked because I looked at it when you originally sent it, and I was like, that's great. When I watched the Black Mirror, what was the one they did? Is it? I think it's called like Bandersnatch or something. But the whole thing was this Black Mirror episode where every few minutes you had to choose the person does this or the person does this. And I kept thinking, in addition to the old Choose Your Own Adventure books, I'm like, I feel like I've seen this. Like, I feel like I've done this. And then I went back and watched, went through it, and I was like, I did this. Was it?
Yeah.
Did you watch that Black Mirror?
No.
So it's cool. I mean, it's a weird concept and plotline, but it's essentially the same sort of interactive video that you did. Since I don't know, is that publicly accessible? I know that was like a project that you had sent me.
Yeah,
So.
it's privately.
Okay, so since no one who is listening, since they can't see it, can you describe what you actually did in terms of putting the 2 sort of
Yeah.
plots
So
together?
again, it took a lot of research.
Mhm.
We knew, and the website that we built this on was fairly new, so we even didn't know how to kind of work it.
Right.
But the idea was to, we had a client come in. It was a professor from George Mason who taught a course on the discourse of terrorism,
Okay.
trying to define what terrorism is, and looking at, or it's more like we were trying to define the term, but we were trying to kind of open a discussion about how it has been defined on the media.
Right.
So what we did is we gathered different real news events that have happened in the United States or abroad that had the term terrorism involved in it,
Right.
whether it's a shooting or like someone driving, a car into a group of people, bombings. So we collected many different news reports, and we kind of picked out the news reports that had a similar action but a different demographic, like a different person doing it. So we found mass shootings.
Right.
One was done by a Middle Eastern, one was done by a white person.
Right.
And we gathered all the different news reports that spoke on the event. And then we kind of took, we recorded the Uncle Sam.
Yeah, like, sort of the news broadcast
Yeah.
that you made, right?
So he kind of presents like options to the viewer. Do you want to hear about a car attack or do you want to hear about shooting?
Right.
And then the person can choose. And then, the reporter is like, do you want to like...
So they tell you a little bit about the event and then say, should it...
Yeah, or you can choose to hear about the event that was done by a Middle Eastern or white.
Right.
And then you hear whatever you choose. And the reporter, we had the reporter say the same words that were said in actual news reports.
Oh, okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
So
We took out the fluff.
Right. Right. So, but you're working with like actual source material.
Yeah. And then
That's
the
cool.
other one kind of comes up right after it.
Right.
The same attack but done by a different person comes after it, and just kind of comparing the different rhetoric of the news.
Yeah. What's an intentional act of terrorism versus what is mental illness? I think
Right.
is a big part of it. Yeah.
Or this guy who they said, the sheriff office said that they're gonna send his brain for more examination. Right?
Yeah. Okay. Great. Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting. So, I mean, it's cool because it's a great look at bias, not just in the media. I mean, and that is a big part of it, but it's probably a broader cultural bias that when you see someone do a terrible thing, it's always terrible.
Mm-hmm.
But when you feel like you have a lot in common with the person who did it, you try to find ways to explain it so that it's not you too. Like, say someone of my demographic goes and does a thing, and I've got to, what's wrong with him that he would do this? Because I don't want that to reflect on me. But when I see his person, I don't feel like I have as much in common
No,
with.
it's that entire group.
Well, now, yeah, it just, and you sort of raise that concern. I mean, the numbers come out every couple of years, and there was just a report again that, and I think it was actually someone, it's someone in the current administration. It's like a head of national security or something like that. They just issued a report that, like, the vast majority of domestic terrorism comes from like white nationalists and like white power groups, and that's not necessarily anyone's like real feeling on it. But I also then I hear that and I'm like, yeah, that makes sense. I hope no one's like looking at me funny because of it. But if we were talking about a different group of people, you would have that concern. So that was a cool project, and it's a cool use of the technology. In terms of what you're going to be doing, say, professionally, because I don't want to shatter dreams or anything. You're awesome. You're going to do awesome stuff, but at least in the short term, like, you're probably going to have to pay some bills. So, to what extent are you comfortable, say, just taking a job, doing film production, say, for a commercial or local news, as opposed to, say, creating your own things? Like, is that an exciting prospect just to use what you've learned and to make some money and do it? Or is it something that you
I mean, I always prefer I always prefer doing things with purpose. And the filmmaking process, it's not a one-man band. It's a group.
Right.
And a lot of times, you get, let's say you get an editing job for a project and you accept it. Most of the time you get paid for it.
Right.
But I do teach. I teach Arabic and Quranic studies. So that's kind of.
Would you do that through a local mosque? Or
Yeah, it's an Islamic center.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy it?
Yeah.
What age people do you work with?
I've worked with different age groups, but mostly I work with like ages 7 to 14.
Is that so? You started to say that's something you could. Were you going to say like fall back on? Is that an option? And now I'm thinking less in terms of maybe what inspires you. That could easily be inspiring too, but in a practical way, like I would like to have a job so that I can be financially independent and take care of things. Is that a thing that you consider an option, like teaching?
Yeah, and part of another reason why I entered this in film was actually to use it for educational purposes.
Okay.
Yeah, to kind of like combine whatever I want to do and use film to teach students.
It's hard to get into that sort of niche field of educational materials, but you can make it. So, I know there's a video that I requested the library a few years ago about race and racism, and it does a little bit of science of what is race and why are a lot of things we think wrong and the rest. But like one copy of the DVD with none of the extra materials was like $120, and I just thought, like, I have missed an opportunity here. Is that the kind of thing that you would be interested in doing? Sort of putting the two together, doing the film, doing the education. Is that how do you do that? Like, have you looked into that?
I still didn't navigate like my way of how I want to do it. I am currently doing my internship with a filmmaker who's also interested in that.
Okay.
And again, like if you're an independent filmmaker, you can also take on other projects, like when they come up.
Right.
Taking different roles on different projects. So
you have options.
Yeah.
Has your school of Mason helped with that? Like, have they helped you find opportunities for an internship or for job placement? Are they supporting that part of your work in the field? Are they helping you to find work opportunities?
Yeah, I mean, for my internship was a recommendation from a friend, but they do help students. It's a requirement for you to do an internship to graduate the film program, and they help you find internships. And one thing they do is they call it film lab, where the director of the program invites an actual filmmaker to the school, and they film something with the filmmaker. They have the students work with the filmmaker. So that's also it's a huge networking opportunities, and the fact that a lot of the professors are actually working in the field.
Okay. Yeah.
It's also very helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky thing you think about as an English teacher. How few English teachers do any, say, like real writing, and at Broad Run, I mean, we have a couple who are studying publishing. We have two. I don't want to forget anybody. I want to say two. It might be three teachers who have published their own books in the last couple of years. If you go into a career, I think half the department's probably published something. I think that's great, but I don't know if that's typical. And so, how much do you trust the person giving you writing advice if they don't really do any writing? So, the hands-on experience is important in creating internship opportunities. They do that now, so I don't know if you know that, but now it's something. I think most high schools are doing it. Broadrun was one of the first in the county. I don't know if we're the first or one of the first, but it's called the Senior Capstone. And so for the last 3 weeks of senior year, 3-4 weeks, students can have an internship they set up with someone in the community and go out and do the job, learn about it, find out what you like, maybe just find out you don't like it. Obviously, doing this at the end of your bachelor's degree, it's a little more focused and intensive and rigorous. If you had that opportunity when you were in high school, what do you think you would have done? It sounds like it probably wouldn't have been filmed at that point.
Yeah.
Maybe it would have, but what do you think you would have liked to have done? Finishing high school, got a few weeks to go work somewhere, what would you want to do?
God, I have to think back. I don't know.
What was I interested in? I mean, I know you said, you're doing interior design, and I know you did a lot of artwork in high school.
Art would probably be my go-to. Like right now for the internship, we're actually filming an artist from Philadelphia who's doing he's installing a public art piece in Reston.
Okay.
So that's cool, having the opportunity to work with artists.
Right, blending interests.
Yeah. But I remember my sister did that too for her senior year in Stonebridge.
Okay.
They do that in Europe. I know my cousins in Germany, they do like in Syria too, when you get to high school, which is like 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade, you're not studying everything anymore. You choose a path,
Right.
and then you either go into like science and math and all that, or you go into languages and arts and stuff like that. So you start to get more focused even in high school there.
Yeah, I kind of wish we did that.
Yeah.
I think that everyone, as long as you're in school, and maybe even beyond that, everybody should be doing some sort of, I don't even mean like English, I like a literacy class. Like, you need to be able to read and write and think and speak and do those things. And you need to be able to do math.
Mm-hmm.
Not everyone needs to do calculus, but like, you need to at least do arithmetic, half of Algebra 1, and a couple pieces of geometry. Like after that, or whatever, but like, you should do, but my personal view, I think, this is an evolving thing, that after you're doing that language class, improving your communication skills and your math and your numeracy, the rest of the day, by the end of high school, like, we probably don't all need to take all the same classes the whole way through high school.
Yeah.
So maybe that, if you say that's more of a model that you hear from family in Europe, that's, in my opinion, the thing that maybe we should be doing more.
Yeah.
That gives you a chance to sort of find that.
And there in Germany, it's not just the classes that you take. In Germany, in high school, they actually start doing every month or two, they are doing an internship at a different place. So you get to go be a dental assistant for a while, or you get to go, do different things,
Right.
So that you can actually get your hands on to in a job and actually experience it.
Learn what you like, what maybe more importantly, what you don't like.
Yeah, and then not waste a lot of money on taking classes.
Yeah, you go to college and figure out what you want to do. It's like, it's expensive. Like, you should probably figure that out before you go spend all the money, or at least narrow down those options. So you said you have cousins in Germany. Do you have family still in Syria?
Yeah.
And
those cousins in Germany went out as refugees.
Okay. So you moved here before, right? So there's no refugee status or consideration here, but your cousins in Germany did. I'm completely ad-libbing a question here. This might be a bad one, I don't know, but what is your sense of things in Syria now? The war's been going on for
9 years.
Okay, I was going to say 7, and that's a lot. It's not 9 years. And I feel like it got a lot of airtime in American news for a while, and I feel like it's largely disappeared. What are conditions there for people that you're still in contact with?
It depends on where you are, but certain areas, it's constant bombing all day, every day.
Yeah.
In other areas, there aren't bombings, but there are arrests. There are, you could possibly walk in the street and a car explodes next to you,
Right.
or you touch something on the floor and it explodes in your face. So just kind of the effects of war throughout the city. There are a lot of people that are going to Syria visiting, but only in the capital, where things are a little bit more okay than other areas.
Right.
But it's still kind of, in certain areas, like in the north, there's a lot of Russian airstrikes, government's airstrikes still.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember, I don't remember the details of it, but it was shortly into the war. We did, through the UNICEF public school, we did the Supper for Syria, raise money. Money went to UNICEF to try to assist children in the area. And you spoke, right? And that was a sort of a cool moment. And I'm going to use the word revolutionary spirit because the alternatives, I think, can have more negative connotations. But I remember just being amazed by what you said then. But I just think now, we're years later, and the situation there maybe hasn't changed in any positive ways. Anyway. I don't even want to say how you feel about it. Are your feelings today as strong as they were then? Because I remember, you gave a speech at the little sort of banquet benefit dinner that we put on, and if you looked around the room, jaws were dropping and there were some tears shed. It was a great moment in general, and especially for you. but you were incredibly passionate at that. Do you feel as strongly today as you do then, or do you sort of start to numb to some of the problems?
Back then, it was more. It was fairly the beginning of it, and there was still hope in, possibly a political change.
Right.
Now, after all of the destruction, I've kind of geared more towards the civilians and their struggles more than, okay, let's try to fix the politics. That's not going to happen.
So maybe less politically minded than you were at that moment.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't have a problem saying no, what they're doing is wrong.
Right.
But there's a lot that has to be addressed in terms of what the people are going through.
Right.
Like, for example, refugees. Let's say a group of refugees who went to Jordan and they're settled in Jordan, whether they're inside the camp or outside the camp. If you actually watch their everyday life or hear them talk about the things they think of and the things that they go through, it's a lot more than we think. It's not just, yes, they're safe from physically safe,
right,
but there are those psychological issues that they're going through, illnesses, the children growing up with just a lot, not a loss of identity, but they've lost a lot.
Yeah. Well, and I don't know that would be overstating it either. I mean, there's probably some loss of identity because there's some loss of culture. I mean, when you're forced to move and then so many things are either destroyed or in jeopardy. And I mean that was.
It's not stable either.
Right.
You're not sure if this is a good, if the schools there are going to provide your children with good education.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have had trouble getting jobs. In some areas, refugees are not allowed to get jobs.
Mm-hmm.
You're not allowed to bury dead people in certain areas just because they're refugees.
Right.
So it's there's a lot to kind of that the war has
right.
had effect on.
And so in your movie then, in Jihad, that's sort of part of it, right? It's to address the individual human situation. Yeah. In terms of timing, timeline, when is the movie set? Is it now? Is it?
It's not clear. I didn't make it clear.
Okay, maybe it doesn't matter.
Because it is a really short film.
Right.
But the point of it was with those couple of minutes, I wanted to show a glimpse of their life before the catastrophe hits, and then what leads up to someone being a refugee.
Right.
Giving the people a chance to look at what was it like, them just living a normal life, a day, and then what actually caused them to get to that point of they want to enter the country.
Right. Yeah, and I don't know. I think that's another place where when you hear the shouting voices on the news, I think sometimes that's a poor reflection of where most people are, because I think most people are intensely sympathetic to people in that situation, but in turn are also fearful either of a spreading conflict or culture change or whatever. And so I think, to make good television, you pick one person on each side and yell at each other. I don't think that's most regular people are either one of those voices. I think you're a little bit of both in some way. And so maybe sort of just showing it as a regular person as opposed to numbers on the screen or a highlight reel for the news maybe is the best way to improve that conversation. If you were president, what would you do?
Oh God, retire.
Well, I mean, as you're making movies, you're trying to influence the way people are thinking and feeling about these issues. You have your thing that you're doing. I'd say if we could just drop you into the Oval Office, because I'm all confused about this. There's a big piece of me that just thinks the United States intervening in other places makes problems worse and makes people not like us. So you want to just removed. But at the same time, it's if you have the resources to help people or to try to influence things for the better, then you should also do that. And so I get really stuck because at certain points I'm like, we should stop that. Like we can do that. And then sometimes I'm like, but that's none of my business. Like if I was president, I would start off very confused. Like what would you do?
I would say throughout looking at the United States interference in other countries throughout history, you can tell, if you study it well, you can tell that it's politically motivated.
Yeah.
It's not humanitarian. Who cares, right? They don't care.
Well, and I won't say there's never a humanitarian thing. The problem is the humanitarian stuff almost always comes later. Like it's after a political issue or intervening in like the Bosnian genocide. Like there's a humanitarian goal there, but it's after all the rest of this stuff plays out, right? And so you think that that's sort of like a false motivation? To say like as a president, say we're going to take action for humanitarian purposes, you just that's not true.
It's not. It's not. Like for example, when I was doing the interactive video project, we came across a bomb that was dropped in Afghanistan. It was called Mother of All Bombs. I don't know if you came across it. Right. And I can't remember who it was, but someone from here, from the United States, said that, we didn't count the dead bodies. It's not useful he said it's a waste of our troops' time to count the dead bodies that have been lost.
Right.
Right. And it's like, why are you there in the first place?
Right.
Is it to save people or is it,
and that's the thing, and how you said, when you make a movie, it's always a team project. Like there's not always one voice. And it's probably how it goes, because there are people who probably have a genuine humanitarian goal, and there are people who have a political goal, and there's a lot of economics in terms of access to natural gas or opium farms or whatever. I mean, I don't know that there's one. So I mean, if in thinking about what would be best for Syria, from an American perspective, do you think that we should do something, or
in the beginning,
do nothing?
Yeah, in the beginning, people were asking the U.S. to get involved.
Right.
They didn't, but I think they did drop a couple bombs that killed a lot of civilians. And then people they're asking just step out, especially like now Russia.
Yeah.
They're just bombing everywhere. Yeah, and it's the excuse is that ISIS is in the north. Yeah. But look at all the videos. Where is ISIS?
Right, right.
Are you actually how much? What's the percent of ISIS that you're
maybe
destroying?
This is where gruesome as it is, we need to do some counting. Right. I don't know. I just get torn out, and knowing that you're politically minded, and thinking back on, say, that speech you've given, but some of the things that we've talked about, granted many years ago. I just think that's a tricky one, because if you do nothing, if you have the ability to help someone in need and you do nothing, that's terrible. But if you end up hurting people intentionally or unintentionally, that's terrible too. And you're kind of damned if you do and damned if you don't. And so I don't know, I personally get stuck on it. So I was just thinking, in terms of, you brought up that Operation Homecoming and the soldiers' perspectives, and talking to family members who are refugees and have that status in European countries. I don't even know how you start to untie the knot. I don't even know what it's. Yeah. From my perspective, things are so messy that I wouldn't even know what to do.
There was another film that I watched. It was a documentary just about filmmaking and being a camera person. And the filmmaker kind of combined different clips that she's taken over the years of her filmmaking career. And one of the clips, it was an Iraqi soldier saying how he was being asked, about his experience, and he said it's a lot different, and they tell us what to say on news and what not to say. There are things that we're allowed to say and we're not allowed to say. And he was asked if they ask for you to go back, will you? And he said no. and they asked him what are the consequences. He was like, I'll probably be thrown in jail. So the people who have been in contact with people there, they prefer not to, because they know the motivation is just not,
Right.
and the result of it is not. And you know, it's interesting. I don't know if do you watch Marvel?
I try, but I'm so far behind that nothing ever makes sense. Like I started, I'm like, I don't know half these people.
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So whenever I watch a film, whether it's just for fun or action or whatever, my mind is just over analytical.
Okay.
And it's interesting because the question of whether we should get involved or not is present in those movies.
Yeah. Is it the Civil War one? Is that
American Civil War? Yeah, they were where they will.
Is that the one?
There is. It's present in a lot of them.
Okay.
Which is interesting.
Yeah.
And you see, like, Captain America does want to get involved, but then the other group is not, and then there's a misunderstanding, and then just everything just goes wrong.
Right.
But then there's also, I don't know if you've seen Black Panther.
Yeah, I actually did, and that mostly made sense. I enjoyed that.
Yeah. So like, Wakanda is like has the power to change the world, and there are some people like people in that country who, they say yes, we should go out and get involved, and other people are like, no, let's keep our safety and not get involved. So it's kind of it's like addressed in that in those mediums, but there's not really. It's always different.
Yeah, and there's never an easy answer.
Yeah.
All right, so I only have like 2 questions left, and if there's anything you want to sort of wind down a little bit, if there's anything that you want to say or we haven't talked about that you'd like to do some self-promotion or whatever, over the last couple minutes here we can do that. But if you could teach a class, and maybe not even take like plan a whole curriculum or something, like if you came back to Broad Run for a day and you got to teach something for a day or for an hour and student cycle through your pick, what do you think you would teach that, say, the general student body isn't getting? Like, it could be a skill, it could be an idea. Like, what I hand you my class for a day, what would you want them to know or be able to do?
I think I would definitely do something more film related, and it would depend on like the time frame or whatever. But for example, picking a movie that almost all of the people their age have watched, right? Or are interested in, and try and like pick out the different things that the general might not pay attention to.
Mm-hmm.
And just to kind of have them realize the different underlying messages that are behind certain things. Like, I don't know if you've seen Incredibles.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that is my son Will. That is one of his favorite movies. I've seen Incredibles 1 and 2.
Yeah.
Probably 100 times in the last 3 months.
Incredibles 2.
Yeah.
There's that scene where Elastigirl is like doing the chase of. I mean, the entire character of Screenslaver is crazy.
Yeah.
And I don't know if people pay attention to it, but there's that scene when Elastigirl is like trying to find out where he is and like chasing. We see visually, the people see the chase, right? And there's like that they really love kind of like adventurous, heroic music,
right?
But what people don't really like, you have to kind of actually pay attention to listen. There's that robotic recording of Screenslaver speaking, and he's basically saying, "Oh, all the people are being enslaved by screens, and like the media controls their minds, and stuff like that." And when you kind of hear that, you're like, I don't know why people are not talking about that.
Yeah, right. Maybe the Screenslaver is a hero in certain ways.
Maybe the Screenslaver is real. You know?
And here's Elastigirl upholding the status quo. Right. Actually, one of my favorite parts in that, I'm actually thinking about using just like it's like a 1-minute clip. Is I don't remember. I think it's in the second one, but maybe it's the first one. They go and they like solve. They fight crime as a family, and then they sit down at the dinner table, and the kids are like, "What are we going to talk about this?" And she's like, well, it was good for today, but we can't do that. And he's like, we did a good thing. And she goes, but the law, the mom says, but the law says it's wrong. And he's like, but when the law is wrong, you do something. And she goes, no, you work within the system. And I was like, oh my gosh, they just had like the entire Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois thing. They just did, Martin Luther King versus, they just did the do you break the law to make the world better or follow the law and do it slow? I was like, I'm using that class.
Yeah, that was also in Captain America Civil War. That was the entire, that's what caused the Civil War. Should we work with the government and, just kind of be on the safe side?
Work with
or should you go out and do your thing that you know is right and save people or whatever?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting.
So if you were to teach about it, it would almost be like film analysis kind of thing. It's essentially what you're talking about is really it's bordering on like literary analysis, but putting it into film. That'd be cool. You're right. I mean, I think the tendency is like we're going to do film analysis, and it always ends up being a documentary or like something very serious, like. You're right. There's probably no reason we can't use superhero movies or even a kids movie, Incredibles. That would be cool. Yeah, that would be. I like that. Let's steal your idea and do the class.
Yes.
I'll invite you and you can help. It'll be great. My only other sort of real question is for the recommendation. So a book, a movie, and obviously you can recommend your own, but go sort of big picture too. A book or movie or a few that you think people would benefit from, either for personal enjoyment or personal improvement. What do you think more people should read or watch?
I mean, like you said, currently, with the political climate that we're in, When They See Us is very crucial. It is based on a real event. So that also tells you a little bit more about our history, but our current court system, treatment of racist awareness, not just for people who are not Black, but for people who are Black and kind of, help those kids, be prepared for what they might go through and and then what are some of the things they should avoid, when we were doing the news report for the interactive video, the other part of the class was doing an interactive video to teach kids their Miranda rights.
Okay.
So that's, it's very important for people to learn. Yeah, and then another, it's a documentary. It's very interesting by the same filmmaker. It's called 13.
Okay.
Have you seen it?
Yeah, I actually used that in class a couple of years ago.
Okay, yeah, it's really nice. It just gives you the entire background of starting from the 13th Amendment of when we thought slavery ended,
right.
And then what other forms of slavery continue to this day.
Yeah, and the after watching that, because I think when I taught you it was right before that became like a unit of the class. I think it was probably the next year or the year after that. I started doing mass incarceration, more on drugs. Sort of, watch a documentary, you go do your research, you make a policy proposal to class. Like with a partner, you get up and you pitch, we need to change this law or do this thing or whatever it is, just to make it better. We have a lot of people in jail, and whether all or some or none of them, however many people deserve to be there, we're not doing it all very well. Most people look at the numbers, it's probably too many people there.
Yeah.
But so I used 13th, and then a book that I had just read recently. It's called Slavery by Another Name, which was made into a PBS documentary. The problem is it's like, I don't know how many episodes, but I think it's like, it's like 10 hours worth of stuff. But then they talk all about slavery after the quote-unquote end of slavery, and it blew my mind. So the tens of thousands of people were still enslaved all the way up until essentially World War II. I mean, we're in the 1940s before it ends, and then 13 points out that we did. So a fan of what was it? Ava DuVernay.
Yeah.
Right? So you like her work?
Yeah.
All right, and give me a book. And I know you said before most of your reading right now is in Arabic, but
yeah.
I mean, is there?
I am reading a book in English. but it's more towards the religious side.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very interesting. It's called With the Heart in Mind,
Okay.
and it tries to kind of break down the meaning of intelligence and not IQ, like not
Tested.
it's emotional intelligence.
Okay.
Or so it's interesting, and like it focuses on Prophet Muhammad and like how he was, had the emotional intelligence and
It's called wisdom.
with the heart in mind.
I just thought of a question. I don't want to like get back. This is more like purely personal. Because I have a lot of Muslim students, and I'm trying to sort of better understand. I'm not as well versed in Islam as I am in Christianity, and so I have two things that I haven't read all of, but I have an English translation of the Qur'an, and there was a book they actually were clearing out in the library, and here's free books, and I snagged it, and it's like the essential Qur'an, and it's a handful of essential passages selected by a couple of university professors, but it's all translated into English. And I had a couple of students who saw it, we were talking to them, and I said, "It's great, like I'm glad you're interested, we can read it." I had a couple of students who were like, "Yeah, I like the idea, but," and then essentially said that if you're not reading it in Arabic, like to read it in English it's so different that I probably shouldn't even bother. They liked the idea, but then very nicely told me that what I was doing was stupid. Not their words, mine, and I thought well, now I'm stuck because not to be lazy or stubborn, but at this point in my life, I'm just not going to learn Arabic. So, which group of students is doing that better? Like, is it worth reading for me, or is it probably an exercise in futility?
It might not. I'm against translating poetry from language.
Right, and you're going to lose the
destroys
linguistic part of it.
Yeah.
I've heard that criticism many times. You will never appreciate the beauty of the book in English, but could I appreciate the content in English?
Possibly, but it might be harder. It might be hard to understand. See, this is why I'm taking more advanced Arabic grammar classes,
Right.
because there's even in the grammatical structure of the sentences in it,
Right.
there's the way it's phrased.
Right.
If I take out one word or switch the word and say it differently, it changes the law, or it changes the way I should apply things. So just studying that, and I don't know. For me, I read it in Arabic, but I also I don't try not to rely on my own interpretation of it.
Right.
I try to listen to different scientists, people who have studied history and who have tried to interpret, no one can reach an exact interpretation of what it's trying to say.
Right.
Even in Arabic.
It's like the Second Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. You have the right to bear arms. Those commas are just stupid, and if someone had just used some reasonable grammar, all of our current disputes would have been solved. And that's there's a mystery in the language itself.
Yeah. But it's interesting, for example, for someone who's interested in science, sometimes my students, my Qur'an students, they ask me to talk about the science in the Qur'an, the things that are addressed scientifically. And from that, I would there are some scholars who geology scholars or astronomy scholars who would get their knowledge and try to interpret what the verses are saying.
Right.
So that's always interesting. You could read the translation, but I wouldn't rely on it.
Is it better to read it than not? If my option is to read a translation or read nothing?
You would get a very basic idea.
Yeah. Because I know when we first sat down right before we started the audio here, I forgot to warn you I was going to ask you for the movie, and you said that a lot of your reading is in Arabic, and then as you're explaining again at the end, it hit me what do you do when you don't have the language skills to access a text, but it's an important text? How much do you trust translating the Christian Bible, or even go to the Old Testament? You're going from Hebrew and Aramaic to Greek to Latin to English, and sometimes it hit German in between, and so you go through so many translations that you can argue the heart of the thing is the same or close, but you probably changed or lost some of the detail through those translations.
Yeah.
And I know that people make that argument, I've had students make that argument about the Qur'an, but then,
Yeah, I mean, reading it, yeah. But then maybe you're listening to what people, like people explaining it.
right.
But I also don't, like, I try not to rely mostly on that because I believe, like, you know, I should be also, like, making my own interpretation according to my own
Right.
way of life,
Yeah.
Experiences, limited experiences, but still, you know.
It's got to work for you. I mean, it's
Yeah.
almost like you said, you know, to do like a film studies thing is, you know, the things that you notice in The Incredibles have as much to do with you as it had to do with the filmmaker. You know, so maybe that same thing applies to other things we read. All right, well, this is your chance if you want to do any self-promotion or you've got a cause or anything that you would like to plug or promote for yourself or for other people or a message to the world. Or if not, I don't mean to put you on the spot.
It's a nice conversation. I don't like to self-promote.
All right, well, as a filmmaker, you're going to have to get over that at some point.
Yeah, I don't know. But hopefully, we're trying to do last edits to the film. Hopefully, getting into film festivals.
Awesome.
Yeah, it won't go online for a while, but most of the work, I'm hoping that some of the work that I do, I share online. So if you'd like to follow my Instagram page,
Well,
that's mostly where I
okay.
post stuff.
Well, cool. And so then, whenever you do have things that are either, you know, online or if you're on film festivals, you know, keep an eye out. But if something specific happens, make sure you let me know, and I'll do a little promotion for you if I can.
Yeah. But for the short film, I'll probably be putting announcements of different festivals if it's screening at on my page and then on the films page on Instagram.
What you want to go ahead and plug those then? So what is do you know the address or what the page is for the movie or for the film?
Yeah. It's the name of the movie, Jihad Film.
Okay.
JIHADFILM.
Okay. I don't think I followed that. I think I followed your page.
Okay. Yeah. My page is just my first name and last name.
Awesome. All right. I'll link them when I put this up. Give you some traffic. I really, really appreciate you doing this. It was nice catching up with you, and hopefully, I've learned some things that hopefully some other people do. So I appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Thank you
All right.
for having me.